The journey is an interesting one, right? A big piece of that is identifying where you see the opportunity. There came a point where I ran into things that I wasn't particularly good at or comfortable with, mainly in the politics space of being in a company and moving up a ladder. When I moved back to a technical role, I received lots of messages from people asking me, "Oh, what happened? Oh, I'm so sorry that you whatever." And it was a choice I made. I stepped away from the role that I had at a company, but I left because I didn't like where I ended up. I remind myself that leadership isn't necessarily tied to the title or the role you have in a company. There's lots of people in individual contributor roles who are leading either projects, aspects, or even teams of people as an individual contributor. Leadership is a mindset and a behavioral approach, and you can lead with those behaviors regardless of what your role is.
Well, welcome to The Shift today, where we talk about leadership and business transformations. Now, today I have a guest on the show. His name is Geoffrey, and Geoffrey Hirschheim works as a solution engineer at Google. He has worked in the IT industry for over 20 years, where he delivers complex cloud solutions in very fast-paced environments. Now, today we're here to talk about his experience as a business leader in the corporate world. And this world is changing rapidly. And so I'm very excited to have him on the show today because my audience of corporate leaders is also listening in on this. So welcome to the show, Geoffrey. And Geoffrey, you and I have met at T-Systems, which many listeners will recognize as the magenta T logo, part of Deutsche Telekom Group. So much has happened since then. Welcome to the show.
Yes, thank you for having me.
When we met there, you were part of, remind me again, this was the SAP. Basically, you were the expert for all things SAP at T-Systems.
Yes, I was the manager of the delivery unit for SAP projects in North America.
So tell me a little bit about where you are right now.
Yeah, so as you mentioned in the intro, I am a solution engineer. I work at Google Cloud. I have been here for about 6 years, sorry, 5.5 years, and things are always rapidly changing here. So it's been an exciting journey, and I work in a group that covers data analytics, AI, and SAP.
I remember when we met, I was at a time where things were similar to today, I would say, economy-wise, people fearing where things are going. Our organization and also undergoing a lot of reorgs, several rifts that you and I have witnessed before we exited. You made, to me, an impressive move at the time. I think you went to Oracle.
Yeah, I actually had a stop in between, but yes, I I moved from the services delivery side into more of the sales and strategy side at Oracle.
But again, you had several moves there, right? And then landed at Google. Very impressive. What can you tell us about that journey?
Yeah, happy to talk about that a little bit. I should start by saying the opinions stated here are my own and not those of the company, any of the companies I've been affiliated with. But yeah, the journey is an interesting one, right? And it's being reshaped now as we speak with AI factoring in, and hopefully we could talk about that a little bit too. But yeah, the journey is an interesting one, right? It a big piece of that is identifying where you see the opportunity. And as you mentioned, that we were in a similar sort of economic situation at the time that we were together at T-Systems, in the sense that there was a lot of shifts going on and how companies were choosing to work with partners, what they were looking to retain in-house versus what they were looking to send out to other folks, offshoring, and the kind of the second wave of outsourcing with the heavy offshoring was a big piece of that. And so yeah, there was a lot that went with that, and I think a big piece of it was sort of identifying where the opportunities were, how to upskill myself, and my team for that matter. When we talk about leadership, right? There was a group of us, and we were all trying to figure out how to best navigate this. And so I think a big piece of that was trying to do some upskilling and identify where we saw opportunities. And at that time, for me, the opportunities were to make a move and do something a little different. And that was the right decision for me at that time, to sort of piece together where I saw the opportunities, where I thought my skills would be best used, and then to go after that and follow it.
That's interesting. I know we're going to talk more about AI, but speaking of reskilling, so I just came back from Talent Connect in San Diego. And so here are the world's talent leaders around the table, largest organizations, right? Being in San Diego there. And I had several discussions, but particularly interesting was this roundtable discussion about where talent is headed and how to reskill them for today's world, for today's demands. And there was this frustration and overwhelm with the sheer abundance of AI training provided, but not really knowing what to place your bets on. Because you don't want just another prompt engineering training. You want to make sure that whatever you train your staff on hits the mark and actually makes a dent. So how did you back in the day, for yourself and for your team, I should say, how would you advise somebody making that decision?
Yeah, this is a very big question that becomes more loaded when you factor in AI. But in general, when looking at it from a team or organizational standpoint, from that matter, it sort of goes back to some almost fundamentals, right? It, like, prioritizing what the results were that we were looking to achieve. If we were trying to upskill into new products or solutions, or even just soft skills of making sure that we were better for customer facing and everything, we needed to prioritize what the best results were as a team, holistically, right? And then focus on the way of getting there, how to make sure that the team as a whole got there. So that may mean different paths for different individuals. It wasn't a one size fits all. I think that's it's funny, right? To send your entire team to one training, that's a great idea, but also you may have different areas, and you sort of have to focus on being able to cover multiple types of things. We took on a lot of projects back then, and we had very different projects from one customer to another. Some were simply just transitioning workloads to a provider. Others were trying to really modernize platforms that they were on. So we had to sort of focus on the team as a whole, focus on how to get the right people into the right places, and then kind of finally the icing on the cake is always actually making the decision. Analysis paralysis is one of the things that I identify as sort of an inhibitor to progress in a lot of places I've been, a lot of teams I've been in. And so just actually, embracing making a decision that's actually going to have an impact and move things forward. You can, you could be the villain, but eventually a decision needs to be made, right? And you need to try to move forward. And so taking all of those things into account, I think, was the best way for us to identify how to uh, um, kind of get the best out of our team, out of our organization, and move us forward.
Yeah, interesting. I'm just curious for those who are making an individual move, for those business leaders, because in my coaching conversations, this question comes up quite a bit. As you grow in leadership, how much do you invest in subject matter expertise as you go up? How do you make that decision?
That's a very interesting question, and I'm not sure that there is one right answer there. So it may depend on the person, and also the opportunities that are there. I had an interesting path, I guess I would say. My first 4-ish years, I was at the Shell Oil Company, and those I was working in a team where my main focus was business development, but I started to take on a lot of the technical work to understand how we were doing a lot of these things. It's just in my nature was to kind of take on more of the technical stuff and try to get that understanding so that I could be more effective. And then before leaving there, I took on a team full of highly technical people, and so it was good that I had that sort of technical background. And then, as mentioned, at T Systems, I was in charge of a delivery unit that was in charge of projects, and so again, it was technical in nature. From there, I did maybe step out of my comfort zone a little bit, and I took on a pure management role, and that role was to manage vendors that we had as a company, as well as a few staff through partners and solutions that we had in place. And I think trying to make that decision of when was the right time to make that move, kind of away from some of the technical background that I had was challenging. And I think, again, I looked at what was the opportunity in front of me. Where did I think um, I could be most effective? Where did I think I could kind of push myself to grow? And that was the decision that led me to take on that type of role, to become a global manager for a small small company that had a global footprint. And we had locations in Asia, several in Europe, and North America that we were managing all out of my team.
Yeah, great. So you really made it role dependent, and I think, like, coming back to the topic of I think nobody can escape having some knowledge, and then the question is to what depth, or how do you apply this for management? So what is AI? You said you want to talk a little bit about AI, and I want to hear from you about it too. Um, what does it mean, especially from a leadership perspective? You can't hide, but what does it mean? How far do you insert yourself, and what do you need to know?
No, that's a very, very good question, right? And I think this is applicable to leaders in all organizations and all roles, because AI is actually going to touch so many things. It's very high stakes at this point in time, I would say, right? Because there's very strong opinions on both sides of it, and so we're we're at a moment in time right now where AI is emerging, and it's this big scary thing for a lot of people. They're really worried about what's its impact going to be. How do I handle it? There's people who are kind of on both extremes of this is going to replace everybody, and this is a bubble that's just going to all go away one day. I'm going to wake up and it's going to be gone. Um, the truth is, it's definitely in the middle of those two things, right? And I think the right thing to look at today, particularly for leaders, is to understand um, uh, how to have the right conversations. And I always frame it in the "what's in it for me" conversation. I think it's really appropriate to sort of leverage AI for what it can do for you. Don't rely on it. It definitely needs checks and balances, right? But also, it's a great solution. It's a great tool to manage some of your workload. For me, it's communications. Is really to help me take my communications to the next level. I'm speaking with very different audiences at the same time. I have some very, very technical product people that I'm speaking with, and engineers that I'm speaking with. But then I also have a group of sales folks who I'm speaking with at a higher, more general level, that don't want the technical details. And so I try to leverage the tools uh, for that.
Yeah, brilliant. Some of the emerging leaders I work with, they would benefit from your approach there, because I always tell them, if you want to speak to different audiences, you have to fly at the same altitude. And yesterday I literally explained to one of them. I said, if the altitude is here, you're gonna level up there, right? And that visual kind of did it for her, because people at that altitude do not understand that level of detail that you need here. So you elevate it to that level. They go, okay, I understand. This is big picture. This is the impact. This is what I need to know. Not everything that is out there. And so I think for that, it's great to use ChatGPT and tell you, like, here's kind of like how to express that a little simpler and condense that, especially when we have a lot of information. When we're the experts, we know almost too much, right? To then bring it back and condense it, that's an art form too. That's
Yeah, and I
amazing.
think I think it's not just a technical shift, right? It's easy to look at this and say, "Oh, this is a new technology, and the technology's out there." I look at it as sort of a fundamental change to how we work and how we lead. So my leadership approach evolves because I don't have to spend time necessarily crafting two emails, right? I can literally write the same thing and choose to have it concise, and I can choose to have it elaborative, whatever, change my audience message. And I think it just kind of helps evolve sort of the how I'm using it. And I think of it in two ways, and these aren't new or unique ways, right? But part of it is upskilling, so leveraging AI to help upskill, and the other part of it is to kind of improve the human connection aspect of things, making sure, exactly like you were saying, being on the right level. If I'm speaking on the wrong level, I'm too high or I'm too low, the connection's lost, right? And then it doesn't, particularly for working across teams or across parts of the organization, I want to make sure that I'm at the appropriate level and that the communication is you know focused on why and contains the right vision and the right purpose for that set of audience. And so I think leveraging AI to ensure that you're hitting those marks is important.
Yeah, yeah. Is there anything else in the world of AI that we should be talking about today?
I mean, you mentioned effective prompts, right, or prompt tuning, and it's so silly, but to be able to really get what you need out of AI, you need to think about it as if it was a person on your team, right? If you have hired somebody, or if you're working with somebody and you need some a task completed, you kind of need to know what their role is, what the task is, make sure they have the context of what's happening, and then kind of explain what you want out of them. And so it's similar with AI when you're asking it to do a task, right? You want it to adopt a persona, you want to tell it what the task is, define it, define the content that it should be working from, and then tell it what you're looking for as an output. And so I think sometimes we pretend that with AI we can just throw some stuff at it and we're going to get what we want. And to effectively use it, right, to really upskill and to be able to kind of get to the next level with it, you need to think of your agent, your Gemini, your whatever you're using as a member of your team. And going back to how to get the most effective results out of your team, it's the same idea, right? You need to give the AI some sort of background, this persona, task, context, and expectation of what you're looking for, to be effective. And so sometimes that gets skipped, right? We just plug in a question. We're like, hey, give me this or whatever, and without sort of the broader context to make it a little bit more successful.
Yeah, it reminds me. So in the early days, you have to kind of untrain yourself from everything you've learned from Google. So it's not Google's Boolean search, right?
Yep. Yep.
Where you just
Exactly.
put like the three words in that you're looking for, the three keywords, but you're putting full sentences in and the sentiment that you're after and what you don't want and what you do want. And maybe some examples to make it better. Um,
It is funny, right? Because to your point, right? We're talking about it as a coworker or an assistant or whatever, but think about how you would handle that person if they were a physical person, right? You would need to know these things. You would need to understand where their strengths are. You would need to define what the task is, and it's not a Google search, right? You're not using hopefully you're not using AI for search on the you're giving it a set of things you want to do, and exactly to your point, if you upload examples, in a lot of cases, you can get some stuff that gives you minimal amount of effort needed in terms of formatting and structure and everything. And that's exactly what you would do if you had an assistant or a team member who you were saying, "Can you please help me produce this, this new thing?" They would look at the old one, maybe even copy the file and start plugging in the new data. So I think it's important to remember most effectively to treat it almost like it is a teammate, a person, or something.
I'll be curious to hear a little bit about the challenges that led you to where you are today. Because undoubtedly you're in a great position there at Google. Like you're doing great things. I follow you. I see your posts there. I know this doesn't come without some challenges. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think you asked about the movement earlier on, and there's a very interesting balance and dynamic, right? That there was an age group that came before me that probably was, hey, we're going to plunk down and work for a big good company, or we're going to try to get to this big good company, and we're going to work there for our entire career. And then I graduated university right at the end of the .com bubble, that wasn't a real option, especially in the tech field. And so I think there's a mindset that shifted, and probably also just the reality of how corporate culture is today, and market-driven companies, and however you want to view that, right? To where you do need to make changes, and to grow means more than just growing in place. It's fantastic if you can grow in place, and I have friends who I speak with on a regular basis who are able to do that, and they always ask that question: "Oh, should I leave? Should I leave?" You should leave if the opportunity is correct, right? And you should leverage the opportunities that are there for you. And so you have to sort of evaluate what is the right step and the right move for me. I took a very interesting career path in the sense that I started, as I mentioned, in sort of business development. I wanted to understand the technical side of this stuff that I was working with. And so I kind of really spent time with technical teams to dig down into how we might improve our processes, how we could become more efficient and more effective. And for me, that meant unpacking what they did and how they did it. And that led me into sort of a team leadership type role, several team leadership type roles, and then into ultimately into management. And I stuck with that, and I made another move. Continued what I think people would think of as an upward trajectory in management. And then there came a point where I ran into things that I wasn't particularly good at or comfortable with, mainly in the politics space of being in a company and moving up a ladder, right? And it just, for me, it was a moment where I had to really pause and decide what I wanted to do. I was fortunate enough that I had this technical background that I had built, and I'd never gotten super far away from that technical side of things. And I understood there were niche opportunities to leverage that technical background plus my customer and business acumen of being on the other side of that, and kind of find a role where there was this combination of both. But I will tell you, when I moved back to a technical role, I received lots of messages from people asking me, "Oh, what happened? Oh, I'm so sorry that you whatever." And it was a choice I made. I stepped away from the role that I had at a company. There were mitigating circumstances. We'd been bought, but I left because I didn't like where I ended up at the company that acquired us, in a role that I didn't particularly choose to be in, and I had to make a decision, where did I want to go from there. And for me, it was one of those things where you have to take into account your skill set, your personal situation, lots of things. And I decided that stepping back more to a technical role was where I could be more effective. And so I did that, and have been able to move through the ranks of technical roles at some large organizations, which has been good and has worked out really well for me. And I always step back, one, being cognizant of the name or of the topic we're talking about. I always step back and remind myself that leadership isn't necessarily tied to the title or the role you have in a company. There's lots of people in individual contributor roles, like myself. I'm in an individual contributor role currently, who are leading either projects, aspects, or even teams of people as an individual contributor for functions or solutions or things that are happening. And so leadership is always a part of it, and how your journey looks can be kind of funny. I think some people may think it's going up and then it drops down into this sort of technical type role, and then you're working back up or something. But it's a journey that um, you have to look at the opportunities that are in front of you, and decide where are you going to be most effective. I didn't think I got to a point in my career where I didn't think I was going to be effective in the type of organization I was in and in the role I was in, and I thought I would be more effective stepping away from that and going back to something that I knew I had some skills and capabilities in. And so that's a decision that I made to kind of uh, move my path, maybe, and find the right opportunities for me going forward.
Yeah, plus you seem very effective and very happy in your position, too. So it seems like you made the right choice. It's interesting that you share your thought process, and I'm so grateful that you're addressing this. Um, it's interesting to hear the responses when people say, "Oh, I'm so sorry, what happened?" Because it signifies how they think about a move like that. Like even lateral moves sometimes, right, are viewed like that. Um, I think your healthy dose of humility there to say like, look, this isn't about the title I carry. And I would say, and I kudos to you, because I think the leaders that can lead without formal authority have true influence, right? Because you have to exert influence and mobilize a team along the way, right, to achieve a purpose without having the reign over, like, I can fire you, right? Or I can hire a new team. That's not real power. Real power is influence. It's not formal authority. And not to say that we're all like power hungry and that we're chasing after that, but like, what is it like to lead, versus manage? So I think this is phenomenal. I think this is also interesting because, you share about a place and time when these things happened. And I think right now, like hear about layoffs everywhere, right? Like Amazon just let a huge round go, Target, Starbucks, right? So many layoffs happening. And yesterday I had my leadership group meet, and we meet every 2 weeks. And the discussion was around like, how do I see the signs of impending layoffs early on in my team, in my organization, and how do I manage around it, right? Which is interesting. We're all talking about senior leadership, right? And they're interested in how do I know these signs? Well, and so as we're discussing this, what comes out is the biggest voice to overcome is the inner one, right?
Yeah, absolutely agree. I think it's again. I made the comment about identifying opportunity. I think a lot of people look at the things like layoffs, right? And obviously they're bad. They're just fundamentally they are. But that creates opportunity, right? Because inertia, or if you have no reason to move, if you have no momentum, if you have nothing driving you, I was at. You mentioned that we were at Deutsche Telekom together. I was at Shell, oil company, and large company that people love to spend their entire careers at. And if we hadn't gone through a pretty massive outsourcing where workloads that I was interested in and working on were moved to an external vendor, I wouldn't have left necessarily, right? I saw that as an opportunity. There was a group that was going to be retained and was going to be safe, and there was an opening in a group that was going to go away and be moved to a vendor role. And I saw that, and for me, it was an opportunity. For the person who had vacated that role, they were like, can't get out of there fast enough and get to a job in the safety group. And so it's there's no right answer, right? I mean, I was a young guy at the time. It didn't have maybe the impact that it would have on other people, but you do have to kind of feel out that opportunity, and fear or negative things can kind of motivate you maybe to see that there is this opportunity, and there's the balance of like obviously being impacted by a layoff is a terrible thing, but that may be the nudge that you need to try to move on. And instead of being hung up on things not going my way or not being the way that I wanted them to go, when I ran into those sort of roadblocks, I tried to see if there was a new opportunity that I could be more effective, or use one of those things as an opportunity to move into to somewhere else or a different organization or something.
I think that's fantastic advice. Now you listen to your gut, and you, like, as you said, fear can be a motivation. It can also be paralyzing. And sometimes people just feel too comfortable. And it's like, in sales, like you and I have sat in sales training together. So we know the status quo is the hardest thing to overcome. And that's not just in sales, that's in life, because the devil we know is often the one we're most comfortable with, because it feels like, we know how to manage the existing scenario, even if it feels bad, rather than moving on. And so I just advise anybody being in that scenario against complacency. That is sure death. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. Right. And I made a comment before about like having to make a decision and sometimes being the bad guy. And one thing I, skipped over there is making the wrong decision. It can absolutely happen. It will happen to you if you're somebody who's willing to step out there and make that decision, especially if it's a difficult decision. There are going to be times where that's the wrong decision. And just as importantly as doing everything right and following the logical path to get to your decision, they just as important as that is if you make the wrong decision, acknowledging that it was the wrong decision and then trying to find the correct path out of that, right? And that applies to decisions made in roles, that applies to leaving a company, going somewhere, and then realizing, yeah, maybe this wasn't the right move.
It's fantastic to hear those insights from you. I wonder, before we close, is there anything you want the audience to know about you, or is there any place they can find you?
No, no particular place you can find me. I guess I am on LinkedIn. No, I think, for me, you made a comment when we were chatting here, that leadership is not necessarily tied to a role, right? You can influence and you can lead as an individual contributor, or as a person not necessarily making the management decisions. I think to be an effective leader, you need to be willing to take on challenges, to understand how you can influence them, and to be willing to make those decisions, right? And give yourself a seat at the table. Leadership is is a mindset and a behavioral approach, and you can lead with those behaviors regardless of what your role is.
It was great having you on the show, Geoffrey. I hope I can invite you again next year.
Sounds good.